What I've been dealing with is people from families across the UK who went into hospital for treatment. And over 30,000 came out with infections which were life-shattering. 3,000, more than 3,000 have died, and deaths keep on happening week after week. So I'd like people to take away the fact that this is not just something which happened, it is happening. It was, as I say, a disaster which was no accident. People put their trust in the doctors, in the government to keep them safe, and that trust was betrayed. And then the government compounded the agony by repeatedly saying that no wrong had been done. And yet, they said, the people had the best available treatment at the time, and they said there'd be no delay in introducing testing of viral products, viruses in blood. And both of those were untrue. That's why I say that certain things should happen. The first of those is compensation. There are other recommendations I've made to ensure that, if possible, the NHS becomes the best NHS it can be.
The cover-up is what so many of these families have been talking about, and as campaigners said today so eloquently, one of them said they've been gaslit for decades. How have they reacted to what you've put there in black and white? Because there's one thing talking about it and trying to sound the alarm. There's another thing to see an official document with those words in black and white. What have the families said to you that you've spoken to today? Now this is out.
Well, I think the families have felt vindicated by what has been said. After all, they've spent now some years waiting for recognition. Because, as I say, over several years, more than 30,000 people came out of hospital infected with treatments which were life-shattering. And it was, as I say, no accident. And it was compounded by the way in which the government then said that nothing wrong had been done. Cover-up is perhaps, it's a dramatic word. It accurately describes the actions which weren't orchestrated by any one person. It wasn't a plan to cover up. It wasn't deliberate in that sense. But in my report, I describe what amounted to a culture of defensiveness and an approach which did result in someone, I don't know who, and it would be wrong to speculate who, did destroy documents deliberately.
A final question. You've been speaking to victims and families today. I know you've just come from the service of reflection, a chance to take in and remember the victims, because behind the numbers, as you've so eloquently pointed out, there are people's real stories. I wonder what you would say to the people in power, the people that can make a difference, because when we talk about public inquiries, there's always criticism that often they come too late. And that has been said in this case. You yourself said it. This should have happened in the 1980s. But what would you say to people with the power to get these public inquiries moving with the urgency with which they need, and implementing the recommendations and actions that are so desperately needed as well?
Well, a public inquiry is something which is held in the public interest, just because the public have an interest in it. Who is to be the proper judge of a public interest in a democracy? The answer might be thought to be Parliament. And that's why I have suggested that as one of the recommendations, that the Public Affairs and Public Accounts and Constitutional Affairs Committee, PACAC, PACAC, should be a select committee which considers any requests for inquiries. If the minister responsible hasn't ordered an inquiry, which he might well or she might well do, then they can consider whether he or she should. And if she or he doesn't then call for an inquiry, they have to give reasons why not. That's one of my recommendations. The recommendations are, I hope, carefully organised so as to ensure that the future will be the best it can be and these mistakes are not repeated. We don't want another 30,000 people to go into hospital and come out with infections which were avoidable, which are life-shattering, which were no accident, and we don't want the government to end up being defensive about them, but instead to be candid and forthcoming in the ways which I've just suggested.